What's up guys, Asian here again with a part 2 of the patch notes for Elsweyr. This is taking a look specifically at the changes made to the Dragonknight class. So for Elsweyr, the devs did take a kind of blanket approach to class abilities and basically redid a bunch of them to kind of bring them more in line with what their vision is for combat. So this particular video is taking a look specifically at the Dragonknight changes, and we'll discuss a little bit as to how these changes are going to impact things moving forward for PvE. I will try to touch upon PvP where I feel comfortable, but PvP is not really my area of expertise, so you might want to take a look at other content creators that do PvP for more information concerning that side of the game. So starting things off here, this is the Dragonknights. We're going to be starting things off with the Ardent Flames. We're just going to go straight down all the patch notes. The link to the full patch notes is going to be down in the description below if you guys want to read that in its entirety. This video is just going to be taking a look at the Dragonknight changes. So Fiery Breath, they increased the damage of the initial hit by 200% to be on par with their AoE standards. The base ability will now rank up in damage for the entire ability rather than just the dot. This is obviously just a straight up buff to Fiery Breath, and this is the base morph of, I believe, Noxious Breath and Engulfing Flames. So both of those morphs also get the 200 additional boost to the initial hit of the ability. So just a straight up buff to the abilities here. Fiery Grip increased the damage of this ability and its morph by 20% to put it on par with their gap closer standards, and they improved the responsiveness of the pull speed from this ability to reduce situations where players were still CC'd after the pull was complete. So I think when they were saying they improved the responsiveness, if you chain people in that are too far away, there's this weird sort of animation delay or animation bug, sort of. I'm just going to call it a bug, where you're still CC'd after the pull is complete because apparently you're too far away or something. So this is just kind of changing that up. The damage, obviously, nobody really runs this for damage at all. Inferno, this ability and its morph now operates like the Flames of Oblivion morph, where they will scale with your highest offensive stat. They also increase the power of these abilities by 5%. Flames of Oblivion, the morph, now no longer exclusively adds the dynamic scaling mechanism. Instead, the morph retains the gaining of major savagery and hits one additional enemy. So basically, this just makes this a little bit stronger. It's not really going to change things too much for PvE DPS, both on the Stam and Magicka side of things, mainly because you already ran Flames of Oblivion, and it already scales off of your highest offensive stat. But this is just, again, sort of just a straight buff. It's a 5% increase in overall strength, and Flames of Oblivion also adds a little bit of additional cleave with the one additional enemy hit, so it hits 2 people rather than 1 person now. Lava Whip, they reduced the cost of this ability and its morph by 5% to put it in line with other melee spammables. And then the Molten Whip morph, they reworked the ability so it no longer grants a passive bonus to weapon and spell damage while slotted. Instead, this passive grants access to Seething Fury, a 33% damage boost to your next Molten Whip cast, and an increase of 125 weapon and spell damage every time you activate an Ardent Flame ability that is not Molten Whip. This bonus can stack up to 3 times, last 5 seconds, and will refresh in duration every time it is applied to you. So this is a very interesting change, both for Magicka decays and Stamina decays. So now you might want to keep Molten Whip slotted on a Stamina decay, because now you can get up to 375 additional weapon damage, which is going to be more than the 3% that, for example, Rearming Trap or Expert Hunter might give you. So this might end up changing the Stam Decay rotation as well as the Mag Decay rotation in order to better maximize that Seething Fury proc. I will have to play around a little bit to kind of see how it'll all work out, what the new rotation is going to be. It's definitely going to be a lot more dynamic, and the main challenge is the fact that a lot of the Ardent Flame abilities are not considered spammables. You have Engulfing Flames, you have Searing Strike, or their stamina morphs. Those are both dot abilities, so a little bit challenging to kind of think up of a rotation here. Might end up being something like, for Magic DKs, might be something like Whip, Searing Strike, Engulfing Flames, Searing Strike, Whip, perhaps. That way you get the full 3 stacks before you use your next Whip, but I'll have to kind of see how this all plays out, obviously. Then we have Searing Strike, adjusted the ability and its morphs to follow their standardized damage over time rule set, so they decreased the total duration to 8 seconds from 8.5 seconds, and they increased the damage per tick by approximately 12.5% to make up for the loss of the first tick. This will result in roughly the same overall DPS, but with less burst damage. So this is both Searing Strike and Noxious, not Noxious, but the Venomous Claw. So or I should say Burning Embers and Venomous Claws, the two morphs of Searing Strike here. So basically just makes it so you can't use it anymore as a spammable because it did lose that first tick. The first tick happened about half a second once you reapplied it, but the changes to the duration did make it so the first tick will happen after that initial hit. So it does mean that we'll no longer be able to use Engulfing Flames, or not Engulfing Flames, blanking on this, Burning Embers or Venomous Claws as our spammable. In the Draconic Power line, Coagulating Blood, they increased the heal of this morph by approximately 19% to put it better in line with other burst heal abilities. Doesn't really change much. Tanks are still going to use Green Dragon Blood. Dark Talons increased the damage of the initial hit of this ability and its morph by 25% to put it on par with other AoE abilities. And then Burning Talons, which is one of the morphs, adjusted the tick frequency, duration, and delay, so this ability follows their standards. The duration remains at 4 seconds, with a 1 second delay of the dot between the initial hit, but now takes 4 times instead of 3. So again, this really isn't going to change too much for PvE or PvP, because obviously no one's running Dark Talons as a spammable, so the damage doesn't really matter too much here. Dragon Leap, which is the ultimate, they increased the radius of this ability and its morphs to 8 meters from 6.5 meters, and now also applies a more aggressive snare to targets it is cast on, to prevent them from being able to outrun the AoE damage when it lands. So a little bit of a buff to Dragon Leap, not to the damage, but increases the range and a stronger snare. Hardened Armor. A damage shield granted from this ability will no longer extend in duration as the ability ranks up, but rather it will increase by 1.1% in size per rank. They adjusted the tooltip to state the value of the shield rather than the percent health it was based off of for improved clarity. So Hardened Armor gives you a, I believe it's a 10% health shield. So now instead of extending duration whenever it ranks up, it'll increase by 1.1%. So it'll be about a 14% to 15% damage. I don't know how it rounds, but 14.4% damage shield when you activate Hardened Armor. The other morph is probably still going to be better, but this is an option if you want to run the other morph now. Inhale. Increase the damage of the initial hit of the ability and its morphs by 25%. Increase the damage of the delayed explosion by approximately 7%. This was done to adhere to the ability to our AoE standards. Note the initial hit of the abilities is half of the AoE standard because it heals for 100% on the damage caused, which takes it up to that standard. And they remove the 6 target cap for the heal, interrupt, and resource return for this ability. So again, overall, a general buff to Inhale to kind of bring it in line with AoE standards. Not going to affect things too much. Again, PvE, PvP perspective, not really using this too much as a spammable. You're going to be using this mainly for like the interrupt from Deep Breath, perhaps. Reflective Scale, renamed this ability to Protective Scale, converts the reflect function to 50% damage reduction from projectiles, and this happens to all abilities, morphs of the ability, so the Reflective Scale, Dragonfire Scale, and Reflective Plate. So Dragonfire Scale will no longer increase the damage of reflected attacks, so instead incoming projectiles will now cause you to launch a fiery orb at the attacker that deals flame damage. This effect can occur every half a second, and then Reflective Plate was renamed to Protective Plate, and no other changes were made to the ability's functionality. This morph, if you guys remember, just gives you 2 seconds snare and mobilization immunity. Finally, we have the Earth and Heart line. So the Ash Cloud, they increased the healing of this ability by 15%. Eruption was adjusted to follow the standardized damage over time rule set, so they added a 1 second delay between initial hit and the first damage over time tick, and they increased the damage per tick by approximately 9% to make up for the loss of the first tick. They also increased the damage of the initial hit by approximately 35%. Cinderstorm got a 4% increased healing done to the ability. So generally a overall buff to Ash Cloud and its morphs. Earth and Heart, which is one of the passives under the skill tree line, adjust the duration of these skills so that their final ranks land on integers rather than fractions when you have rank 2 of Eternal Mountain. This resulted in the following duration changes. So Magma Armor is now 12 seconds from 10.8 seconds. Molten Weapon and its morphs are now 42 seconds for Igneous Weapons and 36 seconds for Molten Armaments. Obsidian Shield is now 8 seconds from 7.2 seconds. Petrify and Ash Cloud have had no changes, and Stone Fist has decreased to 3 seconds from 3.6 seconds. And Obsidian Shield, they just fixed an issue with Obsidian Shield. So overall, it does seem like Magnicate's got a nice buff overall to most of their abilities, mainly to their efforts to kind of bring things in line to their whatever the new rule set is. Again, they do have a new lead combat dev, so this might just be either something they have planned out back when Roble was the Comet Dev, or it might be a new direction that the new Comet Dev Wheeler is taking instead. But overall, mag decays and stam decays from a DPS perspective on PvE side does seem to see a buff here. And again, I will have to work out how Molten Whip is going to play out on both stam and magicka decays. Try to work in a rotation. The main challenge with mag decays, again, is the fact that our other abilities are all dots. The main challenge with stam decays is the fact that this basically adds another kind of ability you want to put on your front bar, so this is going to change up perhaps your bar slots instead. So that is it for this video. Again, link in the description below to the full patch notes for you guys to take at your own leisure, and hopefully you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.